This presentation is on the cell cycle and mitosis, but I am dividing it into a short video on the cell cycle and then another video on mitosis. So we will talk about the functions of mitosis in this video and chromosomes and the cell cycle. This is an amoeba sister video, obviously. I really like it because it lays out the stages of mitosis very well and just highlights the major points that I need you to know. So I recommend that you go back and watch this. Now, this slide is showing you the functions of mitosis. So first of all, mitosis is cellular reproduction. But that is kind of like a generic function. So it leads to cellular reproduction, but this cellular reproduction serves three different purposes. Now, looking at the image I have here, the first function of mitosis or cellular reproduction is asexual reproduction. So I'm going to write this down for you, then we'll go into it. So function number one is asexual reproduction. So now asexual reproduction occurs in organisms like bacteria, right? There's no bacteria sex. So a bacterial cell divides in half, creating two new bacterial cells. Now, the key thing about asexual reproduction is that the parent cell or original organism is creating two identical cells as a result. So for asexual reproduction, I'm actually just going to write that down. Now, the next function of mitosis, it says growth and development. And what I mean by growth and development is cells are added to a multicellular organism so that it grows, right? Like take humans, for instance. We start out as a zygote right after fertilization with egg and sperm. Mitosis occurs in which cells are added. You become a fetus, you're born as a baby, and then you grow throughout most of your lifetime. And this growth is created by mitosis. So for growth, I'm going to put increase in size. And then finally, it says tissue renewal on the picture. I'm actually going to call it tissue repair, same thing. So an example would be like if you have a cut in your skin, new skin cells are produced to patch up that cut, right? So I'm going to put repairing tissue damaged from, I don't know, like a mechanical source, like cutting your skin, chemical source, right? Like if there are chemicals in your body that are damaging your tissues, things like that. So wherever you need tissue repair in your body, that is the function of mitosis. So keep in mind that mitosis is cellular reproduction or division, and it fulfills these three functions that I showed you right here. Now, another key point that is really important about mitosis is that I'm going to write genetically identified, genetically identical cells are produced from the parent cell. We're going to go into that more as I show you the stages of mitosis. So you start with what we call the parent cell. You end up with two daughter cells, but they are genetically identical. Okay, so the next topic for this video are chromosomes and the cell cycle. So we're going to talk about chromatin, the difference between homologous chromosomes and sister chromatids, the phases of the cell cycle, the part that we call interphase, and the phases inside of that or included in that. So first, let's talk about chromatin. So chromatin refers to your DNA wrapped around proteins that we call histones. So you have a lot of DNA in your body, in your cells. All of that DNA has to fit into the nucleus. Now it fits into the nucleus by wrapping around and around these proteins, right? It helps it coil up, and you can see that in the picture here. Now, chromatin is kind of like the loose state of DNA and proteins, right? That's why it kind of looks like spaghetti noodles in this picture. Now, during the actual cell reproduction or mitosis, that DNA becomes supercoiled. It wraps even tighter around these proteins. So it doesn't take up as much space as it does when it is uncoiled chromatin. So remember that chromatin refers to DNA plus those proteins that it wraps around. Now, here is an analogy for chromosomes and genes. Now, chromosomes are like strands of your DNA. So in humans and in eukaryotes, we have what is called linear DNA. It's in strands. Now, this is in contrast to prokaryotes that have circular DNA. It's just one circle of DNA. Now, in this picture, here is a single chromosome. Okay, now the dark areas, the shaded areas on that chromosome are the genes. Most of your DNA is not made of genes, right? Most of your DNA does other stuff. It controls the genes. Only 5% of your DNA are actual genes, and genes code for proteins, which you should remember from the protein synthesis module. So now a gene can be hundreds of nucleotides long or thousands, right? It just depends on the gene. So if you look at the picture here, the shaded regions on the chromosome, they're all different sizes, right? That reflects the number of nucleotides that are in that gene. It varies depending on gene. So if you think of a chromosome like a book, the genes are like words inside of that book. Right? Okay, now this next concept is a little more difficult. So I'm going to explain the difference between homologous chromosomes and sister chromatids. So let's go to the whiteboard to do that. So we're looking at homologous chromosomes versus sister chromatids. This text box is not cooperating with me. Whatever. Okay. So I'm going to have to do a few drawings here. So kind of bear with me as I do this. All right, now in humans, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. There are 2 chromosomes per pair. That's why we call it a pair. Now, for each pair of chromosomes, you received 1 chromosome from your mom, 1 from your dad. That's why we say you get 50% of your DNA from mom, 50% from dad. Now, let's say this is chromosome pair number 1 that I just drew for you here. All right, I'm going to abbreviate chromosome. Okay, chromosome pair number 1. So this is just an example. It doesn't quite work this way, but for simplicity, I'm going to explain it this way. So let's say that chromosome pair number 1 has a gene for eye color. Eye color. Okay, so remember the chromosome I showed you from the slide, it has all those shaded regions. Those are different genes. They all code for different traits. This one, chromosome pair number 1, let's just say it contains the gene for eye color. Now, that line indicates the location of the eye color gene. Okay, now the red chromosome that you see here, let's say that this is the chromosome you inherited from your mother. Now I'm going to write mom in here. It just means that's the chromosome you inherited from your mother. Okay, all of these chromosomes are in your cell. It's just that red one came from your mom. Okay, and the blue one, which you probably guessed, comes from dad. Okay. Now, I told you that it contains the gene for eye color. So let's just say that mom has brown eyes. Okay. And dad has blue eyes. Like I told you, eye color does not really work this way. So if you look it up, you're going to find a ton of different information. But the important thing here is that on chromosome pair number 1, the gene for eye color is present. But mom has a different version of that gene than dad. Mom has the brown eye version, dad has the blue eye version. Okay, so here's the definition I want you to remember for homologous chromosomes. So homologous chromosomes contain genes for the same inherited traits like eye color. Let me spread this out a little. For the same inherited traits, but they can have different versions of the gene, and we call these alleles. Now, here's the super important part for you to remember. Oops. Homologous chromosomes are not identical. right? They code for the same trait, eye color, but they have different alleles, blue eyes versus brown eyes. So they are not identical. Now, here we have DNA replication. So think back to our DNA replication class. And remember that in DNA replication, you have the original double helix. It's separated into 2 strands of DNA. And then each strand makes an identical copy of itself. So here we have DNA replication. Now, after DNA replication, you have sister chromatids. So take me just a second to draw. Okay. Well, I'm just going to draw the eye color gene here. So same location, right? But the sister chromatids are identical. So this is what I mean by that. Remember that the red chromosome was from mom. Now that chromosome made an exact copy of itself. So here we have brown eyes. I'm going to just abbreviate it as BR. Okay, we've got brown eyes and brown eyes, right? Because they're identical. They were exact copies of each other and they formed during DNA replication. Now over here, these are sister chromatids that were made from the dad chromosome. So we have blue eyes and blue eyes. All right, so those are sister chromatids and they are identical. So I'm going to draw this here. Okay, so that little bracket is showing you that those are sister chromatids. I'm going to write a little definition here in a second. So here we have, unbold this, sister chromatids. Oops. Okay, so the reds are sister chromatids. The blues are sister chromatids. Okay, sister chromatids are identical. They have the same inherited traits that are coded for on the sister chromatids and same version. Brown eyes for the reds. Blue eyes for the blue. Sister chromatids are identical. Homologous chromosomes are not identical. They code for the same trait, but you could have different versions or alleles. Add a little bit to this. Now, it is really important that you understand the differences or the difference between sister chromatids and homologous chromosomes. Now, the red sister chromatids are homologous to the blue sister chromatids. Okay, they both sets of sister chromatids code for the same trait, eye color. All right, but remember, they are not identical. those red sister chromatids code for brown eyes, the blues code for blue eyes. So what I'm going to write down here is that sister chromatids are identical. Okay, they form during DNA replication. And one other piece of information, they are joined at the center by the centromere. I know all these terms, but hopefully this is making sense. So if you look at my little drawing here, this area in the middle is the centromere. So if you are looking at the X formation, it has to be sister chromatids. Homologous chromosomes don't attach to each other. Okay, and if there are sister chromatids, that means it is after DNA replication. So let's go back to the slide. Okay, so my slide says after DNA duplication, sister chromatids are formed. So here this is showing you one chromosome. It duplicates. Now you have sister chromatids. Now sister chromatids together are still considered one chromosome. And the sister chromatids are joined in the middle by the centromere. So now we are going into the cell cycle. So the cell has like a life cycle, just as regular organisms do. And there are 4 parts to the cell cycle. I'm going to make a few extra notes for you here. So the cell cycle begins with G1. Okay, G1 is like a stage of the cell cycle. That would be like, I don't know, when you are a baby, right? So G1, it says growth on my slide here, but I want to add something to that. Enzymes needed for DNA replication are produced. So next we have S phase. So think of S synthesis. Remember, synthesis means production. So S phase, you have a DNA, all right, synthesis, which is the same as replication. Okay, now during S phase, sister chromatids are formed. And then we have G2. Now, G2 says growth and preparation for mitosis. What growth means is that the cytoplasm is increased, right? So cytoplasm increases in size. More organelles are produced. And basically what that means is when a cell goes through mitosis, right? You're starting with 1 cell, you end up with 2. You can't have just the original contents of your cell and then it divides in 2. You would have like 2 tiny cells. So during G2, the cell actually gets larger. There's more organelles, there's more cytosol, there's more of all the stuff that you find inside the cell. Not more, there's not like an extra nucleus, but like mitochondria, ribosomes, all that kind of stuff increases in number. And that is so when the cell divides in half, those 2 daughter cells have the same amount of stuff as the original. Now, let's look at a couple of notes I wrote here. Interphase includes G1S, G2. Okay, so the G1S, G2, we refer to those collectively as interphase. Now, a cell spends most of its time in interphase. Okay. Now, finally, there is M phase. That stands for mitosis, and that is where actual cell division occurs, right? G1S, G2, the cell is just going about its, well, G1, it's going about its business. S, DNA is replicating. G2, it's getting bigger. M phase or mitosis is when the cell actually divides. And there are several stages of mitosis, which we will go into in the next video. So that is the end of this short video. So we went over the cell cycle, G1S, G2M, but we also went over chromosomes, homologous chromosomes versus sister chromatids. Make sure you understand the difference between these two things. Homologous chromosomes are identical. Homologous chromosomes are not identical. They code for the same inherited traits, like eye color. Sister chromatids are identical, right? So you have two sister chromatids that have like the brown eye allele, two sister chromatids with the blue eye allele. Now, one set of sister chromatids is homologous to the other set.